Formula One is supposed to be the pinnacle of motorsport. It is supposed to be a fair fight between the greatest drivers on Earth. But right now, as we stand on the edge of the 2026 season, the sport we love has turned into a crime scene. The weapon isn't a front wing, it isn't a flexible floor, and it isn't a secret battery. The weapon is heat. We are looking at potentially the biggest technical scandal since the Ferrari engine drama of 2019, and the implications are absolutely nuclear. Mercedes and Red Bull, two teams that usually hate each other's guts, have reportedly pulled off the engineering heist of the century. They have found a way to legally break the rules, and they have done it right under the noses of the FIA. Today, we are going to tear apart the thermal expansion scandal. We are going to look at how two teams figured out how to make metal grow, why Ferrari and Audi are currently screaming in a boardroom in Paris, and why this tiny, invisible trick might have just decided the world championship before a single wheel has turned in anger. If you thought the 2026 regulations were going to level the playing field, I have bad news for you. The field isn't level. It is tilted, and right now Max Verstappen and George Russell are standing at the top of the hill looking down on everyone else. But before we expose the technical secret that has Honda panicking, I need you to do something for me. We are going to be tracking this story every single day as we head towards testing in Barcelona. The moment the FIA makes a ruling on this, whether it's a ban or a green light, we will have a breakdown up on this channel. If you want to be the smartest person in your F1 group chat, you need to be subscribed with notifications turned on. Don't let the algorithm hide the truth from you. Hit that button now, and let's get into the engine block. Let's start with the crime itself. What exactly have they done? To understand this, we have to look at the new rulebook. The FIA wanted to stop teams from spending billions of dollars on engine development. So for 2026, they introduced a very strict rule about compression ratio. In simple terms, the compression ratio is how much the piston squeezes the fuel and air mixture before it explodes. The more you squeeze it, the bigger the bang. The bigger the bang, the more horsepower you get. It is the fundamental law of the internal combustion engine. The FIA set a hard limit. They said the compression ratio cannot be higher than 16.1 to 1. That sounds very specific, doesn't it? 16.1. It sounds like there is no wiggle room. But in Formula One, the rules are just a challenge to be overcome. The Mercedes and Red Bull engineers looked at that rule, and they noticed a massive, gaping hole in the wording. The rule states that the compression ratio is measured when the engine is static. That means when the engine is sitting on a bench, cold, turned off, with an FIA inspector standing over it with a ruler and a calculator. So here is the genius move. They designed their connecting rods, the heavy metal arms that push the pistons up and down, using a special material that reacts dramatically to heat. When the car is in the garage being inspected, the engine is cold. The connecting rod is short. The piston doesn't go very high. The compression ratio is exactly 16.1. The inspector gives it a thumbs up, puts a sticker on it, and says, "Good job, it's legal." But then the car goes out on track. The driver hits the throttle. The engine starts spinning at 12,000 RPM. The temperature inside that block shoots up to hundreds of degrees, and suddenly physics takes over. That special metal connecting rod starts to expand. It physically grows longer. We are talking about fractions of a millimeter here, but in an F1 engine, that is a mile. As the rod gets longer, it pushes the piston higher up into the cylinder head. It squeezes the fuel harder. And just like that, the compression ratio transforms from a legal 16.1 to a devastatingly powerful 18 to 1. This is the equivalent of a boxer weighing in for a fight at the lightweight limit and then growing 40 pounds of muscle in the ring before the first bell rings. It is a shape-shifting engine. And the result? Reports suggest this trick is worth between 10 and 15 horsepower. Now, to a newcomer, 15 horsepower might sound like nothing. Your family sedan probably has a variance of 15 horsepower, depending on whether you used premium gas or not. But in Formula One, 15 horsepower is an eternity. Let's put that number into race context. 15 horsepower is roughly 0.2 of a second per lap. Over a standard 50-lap Grand Prix, that is a 10-second advantage. 10 seconds is the difference between an easy victory and a stressful fight for third place. It allows you to run more downforce on your wings because the engine can push through the drag. It allows you to save fuel because the engine is more efficient. It touches every single part of performance. If Mercedes and Red Bull start the season with a 10-second head start in their pockets, the championship fight is effectively over for everyone else. And this is why the paddock is in meltdown. You have to feel for Audi. This is their big entry into Formula One. They have bought the Sauber team, they have hired hundreds of people, they have spent years developing their first power unit. They played by the spirit of the rules. They built a safe, legal 16.1 engine. And now they are realizing that they are going to turn up to the first race in Melbourne and get blown past on the straight by a Red Bull that is technically playing a different sport. The anger from Ferrari and Honda is palpable. They are arguing that this violates the spirit of the regulations. But let's be honest with ourselves here. There is no such thing as the spirit of the regulations. That is a fairy tale we tell children. In elite sport, there is only what is written and what is not written. If the rule says the ratio must be 16.1 when measured cold, and the engine is 16.1 when measured cold, then the engine is legal, period. If the FIA wanted the engine to stay that size when it was hot, they should have written, the engine must never exceed 16.1 at any operating temperature. But they didn't. They forgot that metal expands. They forgot that engineers are smarter than lawmakers. This brings us to a fascinating historical parallel. We have seen this before. Go back to 2009. Ross Brawn, a genius engineer, looked at the rules for the car's floor and realized the FIA hadn't said you couldn't have a hole in the back. He created the double diffuser. It gave his car massive downforce. Everyone screamed it was illegal. Everyone said it ruined the show. But the FIA looked at the rulebook and had to admit he was right. Jenson Button won the championship in a car that shouldn't have even existed. Go back to 2012. The teams realized that the nose height rules were flawed, so they built those hideous platypus noses with the step in them. It looked awful, but it was faster. Or look at the famous F-duct from McLaren, where drivers were driving down the straight with one hand on the wheel and their left knee covering a hole in the cockpit to stall the rear wing. It was dangerous, it was absurd, but it was legal because nobody had written a rule saying drivers cannot use their knees to modify aerodynamics. This thermal expansion trick is the latest chapter in that glorious book of loopholes. But the problem for the FIA is that this one is almost impossible to police. Imagine the scene if they try to ban it. How do you check if a car broke the rule? You can't measure the piston when the car is doing 200 miles an hour. You would have to take the engine out after the race, put it in a giant oven, heat it up to operating temperature, and try to measure it with lasers while it is dangerously hot. It is a logistical nightmare. It is scientifically incredibly difficult to prove in a court of law that the rod expanded too much versus just enough. And then there is the political alliance. This is the part that really scares the FIA. Usually, Toto Wolff at Mercedes and Christian Horner at Red Bull are at each other's throats. They are the Tom and Jerry of the paddock. But on this issue, they're best friends. They are standing shoulder to shoulder, holding hands, forming a defensive wall around this technology. Why? Because Red Bull Powertrains hired a lot of staff from Mercedes a few years ago. It is very likely that the engineer who came up with this idea at Mercedes took it with them to Red Bull. They both have the secret. So now the FIA has to fight the two most powerful teams in the sport simultaneously. If they ban it, Mercedes and Red Bull will sue. They will say, "We asked you if this was legal 6 months ago, and you said yes. We spent $50 million developing this. You cannot ban it now." And they would win that lawsuit. You cannot retroactively change the rules just because you got outsmarted. It would be like a referee changing the offside rule in soccer in the 89th minute because one team was winning by too much. So what happens next? There is a crisis meeting scheduled for today, January 22nd. The other manufacturers, Ferrari, Alpine, Honda, Audi, are demanding a solution. They are threatening to protest every single race result. Imagine the chaos. Max Verstappen wins the Bahrain Grand Prix. Ferrari immediately lodges a protest. The podium ceremony is delayed for 12 hours. Lawyers are called in. Fans turn off the TV in disgust. That is the doomsday scenario the FIA wants to avoid. There is talk of a balance of performance fix. This is a rumor gaining traction, and I hate it. The idea is that the FIA would allow Mercedes and Red Bull to keep their magic pistons, but force them to turn down their fuel flow to slow them down.
They would artificially handicap the fast cars to let the slow cars catch up. This is absolutely the wrong way to go. Formula One is not a charity. It is a meritocracy. If you build a better mousetrap, you should catch more mice. Punishing innovation is the death of the sport. The most likely outcome, and the one you should put your money on, is a delayed ban. The FIA will probably say, "Okay, you got us. It's legal for 2026. Enjoy your advantage, but we are rewriting the rule for 2027 to stop it." This gives Mercedes and Red Bull a gap year, one glorious season where they have a massive advantage, while giving Ferrari and the others a light at the end of the tunnel. But think about the drivers for a second. Think about Fernando Alonso. He signed a contract extension with Aston Martin, who will use Honda engines in 2026.
I need you to go to the comments section right now and cast your vote. I want you to type the word genius if you think Mercedes and Red Bull should keep their advantage, or type the word cheat if you think the FIA needs to step in and stop it. I have a feeling I know which way the majority will go, but surprise me. Formula One in 2026 was supposed to be a fresh start. Instead, it looks like it's going to be an old-fashioned war. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. Keep your engines hot, folks. I'll see you in the next one.